things that I asked the White House fellows in my questionnaire was, okay, you had 75 or 80 lunches with all these incredible people. Who made the biggest impact on you and why? And everyone had different answers except one class. There's one class of 14. I interviewed, let's say, 8 in a class of 14, and every single one of them said, General David Petraeus. He impressed me the most. He was the most impactful. Wow. But what was it about David Petraeus? And David Petraeus was, Time Magazine Man of the Year, one of the best leaders ever. And he said, David Petraeus always said, don't be an energy vampire. He said, you either fill the room up with energy or you suck it out. And would go through examples of bosses that you've had, who they are, that they almost have like a black cloud around them, and they come in, and by the time they leave, everybody's so drained. And General Petraeus said, great leaders have stamina, they are in shape, they don't abuse alcohol, they have energy. Nobody wants to follow a tired leader. And not only do they have energy, but they motivate and they energize everyone around them. And, obviously in the military, people stay physically fit, and every unit he's ever been in has typically been the fittest unit. They win all the awards. He drives his people hard. He builds a lot of self-confidence in them. But the key thing is that he always motivates and energizes people. So they said, yeah, when you're working with David Petraeus, the general leaves the room, it's like people are walking on helium. He just fills everybody up with energy. So that was like, aha, don't be an energy vampire. The last story I'm going to close with, there was a White House fellow named Ron Quincy. He was at the State Department in 1985-86, back when apartheid in South Africa was alive and well. Hearing a lot about South Africa now with the World Cup, which is about to get started this weekend. Anyways, at that time, Coretta Scott King, the widow of Martin Luther King, wanted to go to South Africa with Martin Luther King's sister and also their son, and they wanted to hook up with Bishop Tutu and Winnie Mandela, and Mandela was still in prison at the time, and they wanted to figure out how to put more pressure on South Africa and what to advise the government. So George Shultz picked this White House fellow to lead the delegation. And the first story is about taking risks. So they get to South Africa finally. They're ready to go to Soweto, but there's a huge riot. So the State Department said it's too dangerous. There's no way that we're going to allow you to go. And I mean, Coretta Scott King was literally in tears. She was freaking out. And they said, no, you can't go. So the State Department left. And Ron Quincy asks the hotel if they had a hotel limo, which they did. And he had these little plastic American flags. So he commandeers a limo. He puts 2 flags on the front. Coretta Scott King and Martin Luther King's sister get in the car. They left the son because they thought it was too dangerous. He was a teenager. So they go all the way to Soweto. And they get there, and sure enough, there's this huge riot, AK-47. These guys are sitting there, and they explained who they were, and they got on the side of the cars with the machine guns, and the sea of men and women who were rioting parted, and they went all the way to see Winnie Mandela and Bishop Tutu, and they had this incredible reunion. They stayed for about 3 hours, and they really had a meaningful discussion because leaders take risks, and it was a huge risk to commandeer a van and do what he did. But instead of getting into trouble, it ended up being a big success. She went back, met with George Shultz, ended up meeting with President Reagan, and some of the things that they had recommended ended up becoming policy and getting done because of this trip. Now, Ron Quincy goes, after his fellowship year, he's at Harvard, he's the head of diversity at Harvard, and they need a new executive director for the King Center in Atlanta. So Coretta Scott King remembers his young White House fellow who had done this incredible risky thing, and found out where he was, called him, and after a couple of days of interviews, he gets hired to run the King Center. So when Mandela gets out of prison finally and decides he's going to run to become president, he comes to the U.S. to raise money. And they were raising money not only for his campaign, but they had to train 50,000 workers. They had never really run a free election in South Africa, so they needed money for a training program. So who ended up going with Nelson Mandela for 16 days all around the United States, traveling, holding the bags? Ron Quincy. So on the way back, they were in New York and Kennedy, and they went on an Air Afrikaner flight back to Johannesburg. He's sitting there, Ron Quincy's black, Nelson Mandela's black. There wasn't very many black people on this plane. And he's having a discussion, and the male flight attendant comes out with the food, and he sees him talking, and he just berates him. "You animal, sit down, you have no manner." And Nelson Mandela kind of winks at Ron Quincy. It was like turning a different shade of color. And he just said, "No, it's the American was telling me a funny joke." "No problem, we'll sit down." So Mandela sits down, and Ron Quincy sits down, they serve dinner. And when the plane landed and they're getting the bags, Ron Quincy just said, "I don't know, how did you do that? I mean, how did you not, like, you have a Nobel Peace Prize you won like a month ago. You're Nelson Mandela. How do you let someone treat you like that?" And he said, "I learned, Ron, as a young man in the ANC, that every battle is not the end of the world. What happened there means nothing. That's just ignorance. And too many leaders today get taken up with political games and politics, and they get so caught up on revenge and getting back." He said, "You got to remember, I was put on the face of this planet to be the first freely elected black man to be the president of South Africa. That's what matters. What happened back there doesn't matter." Surely enough, 6 months later, he's elected. And that lesson stayed with me. Because how many times in my own life has somebody done a slight or played a political game so that you don't get what you want, and they do it in a malicious way, and you spend all your time trying to get back at them instead of focusing on what's important. So I wanted to close on that. There are literally hundreds of stories in this book in 20 different leadership lessons. The first part of the book is about the history of the White House Fellowship Program, about the program. Then there's the 20 leadership lessons, and then the last part of the book is how do you become a White House Fellow. Thank you very much. I look forward to signing your books and getting to know you better.